Welcome to Day-2 session of the Faculty Development Program, organized by B.S. Abdur Rahman Crescent Institute of Science and Technology, Vandalur, Tamil Nadu, India, and University of Strathclyde, Glasgow, Scotland. It's supported by Edvoy, the Educational Services Limited. Today, we have amidst us Dr. Tomasz John, who is going to talk on culturally responsive teaching in global language classrooms, embracing multilingualism and translanguaging. Dr. John is a teacher fellow in TESOL and the director of global engagement at the Institute of Education, University of Strathclyde, UK. He leads a range of BA, MSc, and international postgraduate certificate in education modules, including global Englishes, language awareness, knowledge about language, language learning in multilingual world, and research methods for TESOL. Dr. John is the outreach coordinator for the BAL, that is British Association of Applied Linguistics, Social Justice for Language Education Special Interest Group, and the Language Curriculum Special Interest Group. His main research interests are language education, social justice, and internationalization of higher education. Welcome, sir. We are very eager to listen to you today. You may take over, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Uma, and welcome everyone. Let me see if I can share my slides with you. Can I just double check with you if you can see the proper screen without the script? Without the notes?
Yes, Professor, you are sharing.
Thank you.
It's visible.
Is it? Oh, let me swap. Bear with me. Just going to change a few things. Try again. How about now?
Yes, we are able to see.
Can you see the proper screen or the?
Yeah, it's proper full slide screen. Yeah.
Great, that's what I wanted to hear. Thank you. So, yeah, we can start. So, thank you, Uma, for the introduction. Welcome, everyone. And I hope my contribution today will be useful to you and to your faculty and to your university. I'm really happy to be able to contribute to this session and to this faculty development program. So thank you very much for your invitation. Today I deliver a session that I've presented on a number of different occasions in different contexts. But for this very purpose, I wanted to do my well to contextualize it for the context, for the multilingual context in India, in Chennai, in Tamil Nadu context that you are familiar with, because I understand that's where the university is based and majority of you are based there. So I hope my insights today will enable you to reflect on your practices, and we will all together learn from this context. So why embracing multilingualism and translanguaging in a global language classroom? What I want to do with you today is to explore various aspects of multilingualism and translanguaging in the India context. And so I suppose the question that we want to ask is, I can hear some people. Is it possible to mute?
Yep, I've done this.
I think the main question for us to ask today is how we can take advantage and embrace all these opportunities in a global language classroom setting. So the main objective of this session is to equip you with the knowledge and strategies necessary to create an inclusive and effective language instructive environment for multilingual learners, because I assume the majority of people that you deal with, your colleagues, your students, will be multilingual learners. So let's dive in. So Uma already introduced myself, so I don't need to tell you too much about myself, but my expertise kind of is quite broad, mainly language education, just to support our diverse student body and faculty. And my research focuses on the social justice and more comprehensive, more ethical elements of reimagining internationalization of higher education, where we challenge assumptions about international students and the languages they use in higher education. And we look at what implications that might have for pedagogical elements, because only this way, I think that then fosters university culture that embraces diverse academic intellectual traditions. So I think like throughout my career, I have actively contributed to the development of institutional vision and culture by implementing those more comprehensive and ethical internationalization strategies. So a lot of my students actually come from South Asia, particularly India, and many of them represent Tamil Nadu and Chennai. So I'm glad that you are my audience today, because I'll be able to perhaps reflect on some of the things that they tell me in the lectures that they come to. So yeah, let's move on. So I have a bit of an icebreaker for you. You can use the chat box in order to break the ice, but hopefully there's no need for that. So I'll start with myself as an example. So I originally come from Poland. Poland is in Eastern Europe, but I live in the UK, in Scotland now. I'm also British. I'm a dual citizen. I've lived in the UK for almost 20 years. So I'm kind of also British, but I've lived in Scotland since 2019, so just before the pandemic. And I do not consider myself as Scottish yet, because I'm still developing that sense of that particular identity. I do not sound Scottish, as you can hear, but I also speak Spanish because I've learned it throughout all my life, and a bit of Galician, which is my minority language spoken in northwest Spain, because my partner is from there. So I am a multilingual user, I would say. So I'm just curious what languages, what different dialects, what different standard varieties or non-standard varieties of Tamil or perhaps Hindi do you speak? And what languages, what dialects, what varieties you speak or you use for what purposes? Which ones do you use at work? Which ones do you use at home with your friends and family? So if I could ask you to very briefly share these with me in the chat box in the next few minutes, that would be great. So while you are typing up and sharing those with everyone in the chat box, I'm going to move on to the next slide. So I thought it would be great to perhaps unpack some of the definitions in the lecture. I think let's start with multilingualism. I've got a very cool short video with you, which I'll share with you in a moment. We'll look at benefits and various advantages of being multilingual. So multilingualism in a nutshell is the ability to use and understand multiple languages, either by an individual or within a community. And it arises from factors such as cultural diversity, colonial history, which obviously India will be very much a part of, globalization and education, offering so many different benefits, cognitive, cultural, economic, and social benefits. And we are going to look at those in a moment. But what I'm proposing today is taking one step further, one step ahead. It's translanguaging. It's sort of educational practice where multilingual speakers use their full linguistic repertoire to learn and communicate. And, it kind of involves using or fluidly switching between languages or varieties to make meaning, to enhance understanding, and to express oneself, rather than keeping languages separate, as perhaps we might have done it traditionally. So this approach, this more laid back, more relaxed approach recognizes the dynamic and interconnected nature of different languages and codes in the speaker's mind, and it supports a more inclusive and effective learning environment. So let me have a look at the chat. I can see some of you are responding to the messages, which is great. Tamil, Tamil Nadu, Tamil, native language, English. Okay. West Bengal. Okay. Great. Punjabi, a little bit of French. Nice one. Hindi and Bhojpuri slang. Right. Yeah, you are multilingual speakers. You recognize that you are in a position to use multiple of different languages, codes, standards. And I can see that you are using different languages for different purposes. So that's also interesting. We'll look at that in a moment. Please continue adding to the chat, and I'll move on to the next slide. So in this slide, I want to just quickly give you an overview of the objectives of this session. Hopefully there's plenty of time for all of this. First of all, I want us to understand the significance in multilingualism in the Indian context and its benefits for students and, employers, people, cognitive and academic development. I want to introduce translanguaging as pedagogical approach that values and uses students' whole linguistic repertoire in a language classroom context. We'll look at some strategies to promote translanguaging practices in a language classroom, and we'll explore ways to create a more inclusive environment for those multilingual learners in a language classroom. So that will include building positive relationships and adapting curriculum and instructional materials. So hopefully by the end of this seminar, you all know how to use this knowledge and how to use the tools necessary to embrace multilingualism and translanguaging in your language classrooms. And I want to believe that perhaps you already do a lot of this by default. It's because it's natural. You are all multilingual, so this comes as no-brainer to you. It's something that you simply do. So let's look more closely at multilingualism in India. So yeah, multilingualism holds immense significance in the Indian context due to your country's diverse linguistic landscape. Last time I checked, I also verified that with some of my Indian students, India is home to over almost 20,000 languages and dialects as per latest census from India. So among these, and we'll look at some of those details in a moment, 22 languages are officially recognized in the 8th schedule of the Indian Constitution, out of almost 20,000. So that's not too many, is it? So the country's linguistic diversity is further enriched by regional languages such as Tamil, as the majority of you speak, Telugu, Bengali, Marathi, Urdu, Gujarati, and many others, and each with its own unique script. So that's marvelous, and literary traditions and cultural heritage. So Hindi being one of the official languages along with English, which is widely used for administrative and educational purposes, adds another layer to this multilingual mosaic. So as you can probably realize, that's a rich linguistic diversity, and it has profound implications for the use of language in Indian classrooms and university space. So, your colleagues and your students perhaps very often come from various linguistic backgrounds, bringing this wealth of linguistic knowledge and cultural perspectives. And I think as teachers, lecturers, academics, it's crucial to recognize and appreciate these diverse language backgrounds. So through understanding multilingualism, I think this allows you to create a supportive and inclusive environment that values but also leverages students' linguistic repertoire. So by doing so, I think we can enhance students' cognitive and social development and promote better learning outcomes and foster some sort of sense of identity and belonging there. So I think moving on, multilingual education can bridge gaps between home, school, and street languages, enabling students to learn more effectively. And sometimes we keep those separate ways of communication in those respective spaces. But today I want to ask a question: what if we were to allow them in a more formal space? And what if we were to give merit for using those languages in an official space? What would happen then? So I think incorporating those native or indigenous languages in the classroom can improve comprehension and participation, particularly for those who may struggle with the dominant language of instruction. And, you know, it also helps in preserving and promoting India's linguistic heritage, ensuring that future generations remain connected to their roots. Okay, well, the next 3 slides were subject to scrutiny by my Indian students, so let's see how well they've done. As you may know, and some of this I've already mentioned, in contemporary India, you've got 22 official languages. Among these, we've got Hindi, written in the Devanagari script, which serves as the official language, right? And it's the official language of the Indian government, and it's widely spoken, let's say, in the northern and central regions of the country. But even though Hindi plays that pivotal role in unifying the country's linguistic diversity, obviously it's arguable to what extent this serves as a common mode of communication in various administrative, educational, cultural domains. And that's certainly not the case in where you come from in Tamil Nadu. The situation there looks very different. So the Indian regional languages, including the prominent Dravidian languages, hold paramount importance in different parts of the country. So the Dravidian language family, which is predominant in South India, includes Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, and Malayalam. And each of them is unique and has a unique, rich literary heritage. And I understand that Tamil is actually the oldest of the Dravidian languages, which boasts classical literature dating back to early centuries and of the Common Era. And I've noticed that some of you are interested in that area of literature. And, you know, that recognition for its ancient literary works, the intricate poetic forms and the cultural significance, I think this is making it a cornerstone of South Indian linguistic and cultural identity. We should be really proud of this. And moving forward from this, you've got various other languages in South India which reflect on that region's linguistic diversity. So I suppose what I'm trying to say here is that languages in India stand as a testament to the country's rich cultural heritage and historical legacy. And that context is particularly unique in the context of how languages are used elsewhere around the world. Because I think from ancient languages that have shaped the nation's philosophical and intellectual discourse to modern regional languages and varieties, I think this reflects on the vibrant diversity of India's people, and linguistic spectrums continues to evolve and thrive. And sometimes the language policies in the modern government are not up to scratch to reflect on the needs and demands of how people use those languages. So, you know, that contributes to enduring that resilience and unity of India's multicultural fabric. So it's really, really interesting. So once we've looked at the the situation of multilingualism in India, I will then move on to some benefits of bilingualism and multilingualism. And then we are going to look at translanguaging as pedagogical approach that you can use in a language classroom. And hopefully this will translate into creating that inclusive environment for multilingual learners. And I'm really curious and I'm really interested how you can reflect on that and how you can utilize some of these tools in the spaces that you are responsible for, in the spaces that you own. But I've got a very interesting video, short 5-minute video for you, which I would like us all to watch. It's about the benefits of a bilingual brain.
Hablas español? Parlez-vous français? 你会说中文吗? If you answered sí, oui, or 会, and you're watching this in English, chances are you belong to the world's bilingual and multilingual majority. And besides having an easier time traveling or watching movies without subtitles, knowing 2 or more languages means that your brain may actually look and work differently than those of your monolingual friends. So, what does it really mean to know a language? Language ability is typically measured in 2 active parts, speaking and writing, and 2 passive parts, listening and reading. While a balanced bilingual has near equal abilities across the board in 2 languages, most bilinguals around the world know and use their languages in varying proportions. And depending on their situation and how they acquired each language, they can be classified into 3 general types. For example, let's take Gabriella, whose family immigrates to the US from Peru when she's 2 years old. As a compound bilingual, Gabriella develops 2 linguistic codes simultaneously with a single set of concepts, learning both English and Spanish as she begins to process the world around her. Her teenage brother, on the other hand, might be a coordinate bilingual, working with 2 sets of concepts, learning English in school while continuing to speak Spanish at home and with friends. Finally, Gabriella's parents are likely to be subordinate bilinguals, who learn a secondary language by filtering it through their primary language. Because all types of bilingual people can become fully proficient in a language, regardless of accent or pronunciation, the difference may not be apparent to a casual observer. But recent advances in brain imaging technology have given neurolinguists a glimpse into how specific aspects of language learning affect the bilingual brain. It's well known that the brain's left hemisphere is more dominant in analytical and logical processes, while the right hemisphere is more active in emotional and social ones, though this is a matter of degree, not an absolute split. The fact that language involves both types of functions, while lateralization develops gradually with age, has led to the critical period hypothesis. According to this theory, children learn languages more easily because the plasticity of their developing brains lets them use both hemispheres in language acquisition, while in most adults, language is lateralized to one hemisphere, usually the left. If this is true, learning a language in childhood may give you a more holistic grasp of its social and emotional contexts. Conversely, recent research showed that people who learned a second language in adulthood exhibit less emotional bias and a more rational approach when confronting problems in the second language than in their native one. But regardless of when you acquire additional languages, being multilingual gives your brain some remarkable advantages. Some of these are even visible, such as higher density of the gray matter that contains most of your brain's neurons and synapses, and more activity in certain regions when engaging a second language. The heightened workout a bilingual brain receives throughout its life can also help delay the onset of diseases like Alzheimer's and dementia by as much as 5 years. The idea of major cognitive benefits to bilingualism may seem intuitive now, but it would have surprised earlier experts. Before the 1960s, bilingualism was considered a handicap that slowed a child's development by forcing them to spend too much energy distinguishing between languages, a view based largely on flawed studies. And while a more recent study did show that reaction times and errors increase for some bilingual students in cross-language tests, it also showed that the effort and attention needed to switch between languages triggered more activity in, and potentially strengthened, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. This is the part of the brain that plays a large role in executive function, problem solving, switching between tasks, and focusing while filtering out irrelevant information. So while bilingualism may not necessarily make you smarter, it does make your brain more healthy, complex, and actively engaged. And even if you didn't have the good fortune of learning a second language as a child, it's never too late to do yourself a favor and make the linguistic leap from hello to hola, bonjour, or ni haos. Because when it comes to our brains, a little exercise can go a long way.
Okay, so I hope that was useful, and I do realize that perhaps some of the context from this video might be not necessarily translating into the multilingual India context, because I believe your context is much more complex. Another potential contrast would be that bilingualism is sometimes conducted, or work around that research is conducted by people from global north, where monolingualism is a very pervasive ideology, and perhaps those academics have very limited understanding of multilingualism. So, you know, you are looking at a person who speaks 2 or 3 languages. The cognitive advantages are so obvious. Can you imagine how many more advantages are there for someone who speaks even more languages, who understands how to operate at multilingual spaces? Let's look at some more benefits of multilingualism. So numerous benefits for people in general, but we're looking at academic context here. So benefits for students' cognitive and academic development, because the research suggests that multilingual learners often demonstrate enhanced problem-solving skills, increased creativity, improved critical thinking abilities, and additionally, being multilingual fosters that cultural understanding which promotes global perspectives, which are, as you know, valuable skills in today's interconnected world. So let's start at enhanced cognitive skills. The video explains some of this. I think one of the most significant advantages of multilingualism is that impact on cognitive development, because the studies show that multilingual individuals tend to excel in problem solving. They demonstrate superior analytical skills compared to the monolingual speakers. And that mental flexibility required to switch between languages enhances that executive functions such as attention control, working memory, cognitive flexibility. And, these are top skills. They not only benefit academic performance, but also prepare students for complex real-world challenges. Next, the increased creativity. I think the multilingual students often exhibit higher levels of creativity, and that ability to think in multiple languages, multiple linguistic spheres allows for more diverse perspectives and sort of unconventional solutions to problems. So that linguistic diversity fosters innovative thinking and opens up avenues for creative expression. In arts and literature, and even in scientific research, I think multilingualism can be a powerful tool for originality and inventive thinking. Next, critical thinking. That's another area where multilingual individuals excel. The process of learning and using multiple languages requires constant analysis and evaluation of linguistic structures and cultural context. And that increased activity strengthens critical thinking skills. And that process then enables students to assess information more thoroughly and make more informed decisions. And as they navigate different languages, multilingual learners develop a keen ability to recognize nuances and draw connections between various concepts. For me, one of the main benefits is that cultural understanding and global perspectives. I think it's a key benefit for someone who wants to work for international company, communicate with people from different languages and cultures, you know, a global citizen. Because in our increasingly globalized world, I think cultural competence is a very crucial, if not the most crucial skill. And I think that multilingualism inherently promotes cultural understanding and empathy. Students who speak multiple languages gain insights into diverse cultures, traditions, viewpoints, and this exposure then fosters a sense of global citizenship and prepares them to engage with people from different backgrounds more effectively. So I think those individuals are then better equipped to participate in international collaborations, contribute to global initiatives, etc. I hope you can relate. So many academic advantages. So it's within our remit to ensure that the multiple languages and codes are invited in academia. I think the cognitive benefits of multilingualism translates into better performance into subjects such as mathematics, science, reading comprehension, because multilingual education programs have shown to enhance students' metalinguistic awareness, allowing them to understand and manipulate linguistic structures more effectively. So this heightened awareness supports literacy development and overall academic achievement. And finally, professional and personal growth. We all benefit from that. I think beyond the classroom, multilingualism offers long-term professional, personal benefits. In the job market, for example, selling your multilingual skills can really tap into highly sought skills, communication skills, cultural adaptability, and that fluency in multiple languages can open door to international careers, enhance opportunities for travel and personal enrichment. Perhaps not here, because I would go back to the cognitive advantage, but you know, there's also research that confirms that multilingualism translates directly into an enhanced lifespan. You live longer because you engage the different areas of your brain on a more regular, systematic basis. And I think that advantage convinced anyone to speak or to learn to speak another language. Before we move on to translanguaging, you know, there is certain myths and misconceptions that are worth unpacking. I still think that they are very common in our spaces, in our educational contexts, and we have to educate ourselves to move on from certain misconceptions. So firstly, the notion that multilingualism hinders any one language development is completely unfounded. In fact, I think multilingual students can transfer skills between languages and leverage their linguistic repertoire for enhanced language acquisition. It takes a bit longer for, let's say, children or early users or speakers of language 2, 3, 4, but long term, in the long run, they catch up with that initial lack of fluency and accuracy. So that diverse language background enrich the overall language abilities. Secondly, I think it's crucial to acknowledge here that the value of multilingual learners' diverse language backgrounds, and we need to appreciate the resources, because multilingualism contributes to cultural diversity and fosters a more inclusive classroom environment. So lastly, I think embracing multilingualism benefits all students, regardless of the language background, because by exposing them to different perspectives, we enhance their global competence. Okay, so I think it's time to move on to the next section of the lecture, next part, where we look at translanguaging, which is a pedagogical approach. So translanguaging recognizes and values students' linguistic repertoires, allowing them to use their entire language repertoire to make meaning and engage in learning. And I think it goes beyond a strict separation of languages, and it encourages students to draw on the language resources to deepen their understanding of concepts and express their ideas effectively. So let's break it down even further. I think translanguaging involves the seamless integration and use of different languages in the classroom. By encouraging students to code switch and code mix, we create an inclusive environment that recognizes and values the diverse linguistic resources. And then therefore, translanguaging allows students to leverage their skills and knowledge in multiple languages to enhance the overall learning experience. So I'm going to give you some practical strategies for promoting translanguaging practices in a language classroom. It could be English medium classroom, it could be Tamil medium classroom. This is really flexible. Firstly, I would encourage code switching and code mixing in appropriate contexts, such as during discussions or when clarifying complex concepts. Secondly, I would consider pairing students with different language backgrounds to allow them to be more creative in collaborative activities, to sort of foster peer learning and linguistic diversity. And lastly, I would design activities that integrate multiple languages, allowing students to engage meaningfully with content while utilizing the entire language repertoire. So perhaps in the past, you would use one language policy, the target language policy in the classroom, especially if we are talking about using English in outer circle or the expanding circle, where you have to create meaningful, authentic opportunities for students to use the target language. But I think, again, this taps into that monolingual ideology, and it stems from lack of understanding how multilingualism works. So I'll give you some more examples of effective translanguaging activities. And in a moment, hopefully you will be able to use some of them in a breakout room activity in your groups. So to gain a better understanding of how translanguaging can be implemented into the classroom, I think these activities not only can help you with enhanced language skills, your students' language skills, but also they can foster more inclusive and engaging learning environments. So the language-rich storytelling is a really powerful tool. So let me tell you about it. So in this activity, students are encouraged to use their preferred language to narrate stories, share personal experiences, and describe cultural traditions. And by allowing students to express themselves in the language they are most comfortable with, we then by default create that more inclusive classroom atmosphere. This approach not only promotes engagement, but also helps in the development of cognitive and narrative skills in multiple languages. And teachers can further enrich this activity by incorporating visuals, props, digital media, just to allow students to enhance their stories and express their ideas more vividly. I've done it many times with different students. I've encouraged my pre-service TESOL teachers to use that as an activity in the volunteering and the placement classes, and they're always very interactive and exciting, and there's a lot of interesting stuff coming out of it. But I jumped one slide, let me go back. But let's move on to the next activity, multilingual group discussion. I think that's quite interesting too, where we encourage students to use multiple languages to generate that more active peer interaction and knowledge sharing. In these discussions, students can switch between languages to better articulate their thoughts, ask questions, and provide explanations. And I think while this sometimes happens in less formal settings, such as street, or we do it with multilingual friends, perhaps this is still actively being penalized in formal settings, such as classroom. And I think we need to relax our stance on that and invite more linguistic creativity there, because if we allow this activity helps students learn from one another and understand different perspectives. And it also promotes collaborative problem solving and critical thinking. And I think teachers can support these discussions by providing, I don't know, sentence starters, visual aids, key vocabulary in different languages, in which they can ensure that all students participate effectively. Again, I mean, this perhaps is more difficult to integrate into your classroom context if you do not speak, or if you do not use, or if you're not familiar with other languages that your students use, because there's this sense of discomfort, like, oh, what are they talking about? I don't understand them. But again, we should, have more trust in them and allow them to use the full linguistic repertoire without being too overwhelmed about what they might be talking about just because we don't understand it. That leads me to tell you about the last activity, language portfolio and reflective journal, which are, sorry, I jumped again, which are excellent tools to document the learning journey across multiple languages in different subjects, in different content areas. So the portfolio can include a written assignment, project reflections, language exercises, and creative works in various languages. And that allows students to then regularly reflect on their learning experiences, challenges, and progress. And I've done this before with some of my students, and the feedback was that the practice not only enhanced their metacognitive skills, but also this activity encouraged students to take ownership of the language development. And my role as a teacher was to guide students in setting goals, providing feedback, but most of all, celebrating the milestones in the multilingual journey. Okay, how are we moving with time? I think we are still on time. I've got a few more slides before I set up a task for you. I can see there's an activity going on in the chat. Yes, I've got the slides for everyone. I'll share with them later after this lecture. Okay, let me just have a sip of water. So yeah, if you were to play or use those tasks that I've just mentioned interchangeably, that then I believe translates into creating more inclusive environment for multilingual learners. So the strategies for building positive relationships with multilingual students and their families within your school, university, classroom context are so obvious, because as teachers, as lecturers, I think it's essential to establish positive relationships with, I don't know, the wider range of stakeholders, not just students, but the families, the FED sector, the companies that you perhaps collaborate with to provide students with placement or volunteering opportunities. And if they also operate in multilingual setting, this can be achieved through open communication, active listening, and respect for everyone's cultural and linguistic backgrounds. So I think there's something special about fostering those wider relationships where we create a supportive environment that recognizes and values the experiences and identities of our students. And, we then recognize that complex multilingual context they operate in outside of the classroom environment. So how to build positive relationships with multilingual students and other stakeholders and families. I think perhaps this is more relevant to a context where you work in a perhaps international primary, secondary school. But I think this can also translate into the university context, where perhaps family could be the third sector, the companies that students go on to have placements and volunteer with. So I think to initiate that open and ongoing communication with students and that third sector, we need to foster a more welcoming and inclusive classroom environment where all the students representing different cultures and languages feel valued and respected. So if you establish that closer partnership with the families, but also with the placement opportunities of the companies that students work in, I think this will be then detrimental to the students' positive advantage and how they kind of take advantage and embrace that multilingualism that they represent. But I think because the majority of you are university academics, lecturers, I think there's something about looking at curriculum and instructional materials that could be taken into account, because I think there's always room to revive those materials to meet the diverse needs of multilingual learners. And it's crucial to adapt curriculum and instructional materials if you want to consider incorporating those culturally relevant and inclusive content that reflects on students' backgrounds and experiences. So that scaffolding and support, such as, using visual aids, graphic organizers, multilingual resources, looking at texts in different languages, can really facilitate that comprehension and language development in the long run. But, ideally, it would be even better if you, as a role model, as an instructor, as a university lecturer, used multiple ways of communication to kind of show to students it could be done. So differentiating language instruction to meet those diverse needs of multilingual learners involves tailoring instruction to address the varying needs, strengths, and interests of multilingual learners. So in order to provide flexible grouping arrangements, maybe like pairing students with different language backgrounds for collaborative tasks, we can then offer a wide range of learning opportunities. I think as long as you include different learning styles, visual, auditory, or kinesthetic modalities, then you are on the right way to achieve that. But there's something about individualizing, tailoring that language instruction by setting appropriate language and content goals for each student as well. What will help them with scaffolding the various linguistic inputs will be providing that scaffolding and support for language development across content areas, different subjects in a sort of global language classroom. And that language development can be and should be supported across all content areas. I think there's something about encouraging that explicit language instruction, vocabulary development, and opportunities for purposeful and meaningful language practice. And these are the key words: authentic, meaningful, and purposeful. So, beginners or maybe less advanced learners, you could provide some sentence frames, sentence starters, graphic organizers to guide students in how to express their ideas effectively. Sorry. So that scaffolded, supported instruction empowers multilingual learners to engage with content while enhancing their language skills. Okay, so that leads me to setting a task for you. I've got a mini role play task where I would like you to look at how you can promote translanguaging in the classroom, in the space that you are responsible for. And the main objective behind this task would be to practice and explore strategies for promoting translanguaging practices in a, well, I put English medium classroom because I think English would then allow space for other languages. But you can imagine it's a different medium classroom as well. Okay, so listen to me carefully. These are the instructions. In a moment, I'm going to send you away to breakout rooms where you will be working in groups of 3 or 6. And I want you to imagine that one of you is the teacher, one of you is student 1, and another one of you is student 2. In a moment, I'll show you a different scenarios based on different case studies in which translanguaging can be used in the classroom. I want you to decide which scenario would you like to analyze and create the role play about. In this task, you will need to assume your role and engage in a role play based scenario. Maybe I'll give you 10 minutes, 10, 12 minutes to work on this. I'll pop in to see how the discussions are developing in some of the groups. And when I bring you back to the big room, I will want you to either demonstrate that role play or perhaps one of you to reflect on the task and see what you came up with, okay? So this is scenario 1, storytelling activity. Because I'm losing voice, I will give you 20 seconds to read through it yourselves. Okay, so that's the storytelling activity scenario. If you like it, please discuss it in the breakout room in a moment. We've got the second scenario here, which is revolving around vocabulary building. I'll let you read through it quickly. Okay, the third scenario is a group discussion scenario. Have a look at the script. And the last scenario is a language portfolio, the last activity that I've mentioned. And you are the teacher implementing a language portfolio project. So let me go back to the instructions. So once again, I'll divide you into small groups. You will need to choose one scenario, not all of them. Choose any you like. And hopefully when I bring you back to the big room, we will have at least 2-3 groups that will be able to reflect on the discussions and the role play. And I just want you to discuss perhaps the implications of using some of those activities in your spaces within the university or other teaching learning context that you are familiar with. Okay, so I hope this is clear. I'm about to organize breakout groups, so bear with me. I'll create 12 breakout rooms with 7 to 8 participants per room. I'll give you 10 minutes for this task, and I'll bring you back after 10 minutes. Hopefully, we'll be able to discuss some of those implications. So I'll create the breakout rooms now, and I will also share my slides with you again in case you didn't manage to download them yet. So I'll see you in 10 minutes. Okay, let's continue. I can see that the majority of you returned from discussing in the breakout rooms, and I joined some of the group discussions, and thank you very much for your heated debates and arguments. I was wondering whether there's anyone who would like to summarize what was discussed, or perhaps if you have any questions or comments. It would be really good to hear from you because we've got another 15 minutes to wrap things up.
Yes, Dr. Thomas, we had a group discussion.
Hi, Rahman.
Okay. So during the discussion, I found that it's even more challenging for the teacher to handle this translanguaging and the multilingual classrooms. And I'm really puzzled actually how to manage this. Because the teacher needs to know all the languages, right, in order to understand and then coordinate or scaffolding.
I thought what you did,
So,
what you did there was so good because you asked who speaks what languages, and you were like proving the point. Oh, can you say that in your language? And obviously one of your colleagues or one of the students, I think, said something and no one had a clue what he talked about. And obviously, this is like a very hardcore example of a very bad pedagogical attempt to integrate translanguaging, because obviously, if we don't speak the language and if that person will completely immerse themselves in language B, C, and D that no one else understands, this is not going to work and it won't achieve any sort of benefits. Ideally, Zoom should have a technology integrated that is going to translate this person's language into English or perhaps Hindi or Tamil for everyone to understand, okay? But we are not as advanced yet. I suppose the pedagogical translanguaging that I mentioned would encourage the teachers to tell students to use elements or examples of maybe words, phrases, or sentences that can be integrated into other languages. So if this person is going to completely switch into language B, C, and D, that is not going to work. If I make sense, does that make sense, Rafna? I think because that's what I understand you were trying to prove. This is not going to work. So unless you allow the student or your colleague or anyone who's using multiple languages to use visuals, moving image, video, body language, some sort of technology to help you translate, to contextualize the use of that new language for everyone to learn from, it will be a very bad attempt to incorporate translanguaging.
Exactly. We need to have technology. We have to have Google Translate with this, or people who knows all the languages. No, we have to strategically approach this. Thank you, Dr. Thomas. It was a good experience.
Yeah, it's good to experiment with that. Out of curiosity, what was the language that your colleague or your classmate used to explain the situation?
Tamil.
Well, was it Tamil?
Okay. Yeah.
I guess you were trying to prove me wrong. I don't speak any Tamil.
One. Yeah.
But I could understand some English words in Tamil. So even though you use Tamil, you see, I think I would perhaps still be able to guess the context in which the discussion takes place, because globalization is here, English is everywhere. So you never just fully change or switch or swap to a different language. Translanguaging allows borrowings from other languages, and English is everywhere. You know, the same with English. One of the reasons why English is so popular around the world, obviously, it's the colonial history, it's the trade, it's slavery. It's got a very bad, dark history. But all this meant that English borrowed words for different things from different languages. And one of the ideas why people find learning English so quickly is because English has elements of other languages in it. Someone raised their hand. Nilofer, would you like to ask a question or make a comment?
Thank you very much, sir. It was a good experience for me to join that class. I would like to add a comment that India being a multilingual country, we have so many languages, and then we have so many vernaculars also. So within a state, we have like 15 to 16 vernaculars. Like I am from Uttarakhand, it's a state from the north. So I feel that English is the link language. It's the go-to language in India. I mean, pardon the colonial take on this, but English is the only answer to connect India from land to breadth and from, you know, state to state. So this is what I feel. Thank you. Because we had a situation where I got stuck. There was a Tamil speaker, and I could not grasp a single word from that communication. So for me, English was the only way to connect with the people from other states.
I understand. Thank you for your comment. Of course, I think it's very important to acknowledge the colonial history of English and, you know, the Great Britain's colonial history. And I think at the moment, there is this trend within higher education, but also knowledge making in general, to decolonize everything, to go back to the roots, to ask questions why. But, you know, perhaps in the case of multilingual India, English can solve some problems in terms of uniting or allowing communication and progress, and perhaps resolving some other more major issues, right? Going beyond higher education or education. I think that's a topic for another lecture here. Do you think English is the solution to the multilingual? Because, you know, the multilingual reality in India shouldn't be a problem. I think the multiple languages, vernaculars, standards were always there, and people somehow communicated. Why do we suddenly want to standardize things and perhaps, yeah, use English as the savior, right? Here, I think we should challenge that assumption here sometimes. I think we've got time for another question or comment. So if you'd like to go ahead, please, this is your chance. This is your opportunity. I haven't had a look at the chat. I don't know what's happening there. Shaima or Shima, you've raised your hand. Do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, it's not a question actually. Actually, we had a small discussion in our breakup room. We actually, I'd like to summarize what we had come to.
Thank you.
So the scenario which we took was the first one, where the student one is comfortable in talking in his native language, and the student two is a proficient English speaker. So in that case, we concluded that first thing which we have to see is how we translate it. When student one, when he is comfortable in his own native language, when he is expressing his ideas in native language, it must be conveyed to the student two clearly, so the teacher can take up that particular role and convey it, or else anybody else who can sum up among the students, who can summarize what is actually happening, we can translate it to the proficient speaker. So these are points which we had come to a conclusion. We have discussed it, and also
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there something else you wanted to add?
Also, we just came to a conclusion that confidence of that native language speaker should not go down, since he is not a good proficient in talking in English. So he might think that, okay, if what if I go wrong? So that should be that particular icebreaker should be cut out. So a teacher can take up that particular role and boost up his confidence and convey it. These are the things which we can conclude at there.
Thank you. No, very, very relevant, Shaima. Thanks, Shaima.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think what we have to be very careful is to move away from the kind of perfect user, native speaker-like use or fluency or accuracy, because the whole world speaks English as a second language. So why should we all aspire to speak like British or American? I think the world will always change, language will always evolve, and perhaps standardizing this according to the very kind of ambitious native speaker-like competencies are sort of unrealistic, because that's not how the rest of the world, multilingual world, communicates. But I think what you said first about that negotiation of meaning between student 1 and 2 in the first place before the storytelling activity or process develops further is very useful, because this allows for deeper level of communication. And don't forget, when you storytell, you can use all sorts of media. It's a multimodal way of expressing. So language can be complemented by moving image, by body language, by music, by anything that would engage classmates, other students, teachers in understanding perhaps that one word, one phrase, one sentence from a different language. Something important that was mentioned in one of the groups that I joined early on is that you should never fully swap from one language to another. You should sort of code switch, mix and match, so that perhaps what I said earlier, someone switched completely to Tamil, I could still understand what was being discussed, because that Tamil user was throwing English words here and there. I'm talking about that more strategic use of pedagogical translanguaging, where you understand that your listeners or your classmates, your co-workers, employees won't understand you until or unless you contextualize, you translate through different modes, and you never fully go to the polar opposite, different language, because you will lose people along the way, and that won't be helping with the storytelling activity, right? So with the storytelling, the trick here is to make sure people stay focused. But if you lose them easily by switching completely to a different language that they are not familiar with, that might not be the best way forward. So thank you for those comments. I
Thank
can
you,
see
Dr.
that
Tomasz. There is a query here, yes, in the chat box.
Sure, let me have a look. Cool. So we've got a question from Vijaya. How can culturally responsive teaching practices be systematically integrated into language curriculum development to support multilingual and translanguaging approaches? This is a very big question. And I suppose, it's one of the questions that we won't have systematic, comprehensive, informative answers today. And I think we shouldn't go for prescription. We shouldn't go for prescriptive approaches, because the context will be very different. I think if you are working at the university, the question you need to ask yourself is to what extent exposing your students to other modes of communication in your subject, moving beyond English, Tamil, Hindi, can be useful for other cognitive, psychological, knowledge-making benefits, okay? I think perhaps you are doing this to some extent, but perhaps there's something to do with language policy that should be implemented better into curriculum. So perhaps the policymakers and educators should work together much more closely. And what are the key indicators of successful implementation of translanguaging strategies in language education? I don't know. I truly believe that India, as such a powerful multilingual context, could be a role model in setting the stone for, I don't know, global citizen multilingual skills, where code switching could be the skill to invest lots of energy and education into, because I believe that perhaps this is the future of the world. We are becoming one global village. We will be exposing to different ways of thinking, making knowledge, different ways of expressing ourselves. So we've got technology to help us make sense of it. So perhaps the key indicator of successful implementation, maybe that's not the best way of framing this, because it sounds like a KPI. It's very corporate and business oriented. I don't think it should be, because it gives you the impression that you should aspire to be a perfect user of switching between languages. And I think the messy translanguaging or code switching in the way you express yourself as a global citizen, as a perhaps person that communicates in different spaces using multiple languages, shouldn't be about perfection. I think it's something about making a mistake and negotiating that communication that makes it more authentic, more natural. I don't know whether I'm answering your question there, but I don't know what else to say. And I can see...
Dr. Thomas, yeah, on this note, I just have another question. During the course of your talk, you were just referring to neuroimaging, especially bilingual learners and multilingual learners are cognitively better compared to monolingual users. And I absolutely agree with you, because in observation, I have seen people who speak multiple languages naturally have better creativity and better cognitive function. So having said that, my question is, see, when we talk about neuroimaging, which you are referring to, maybe in the Western context, when the sample size as a research approach, if it is too small, maybe you can use neuroimaging. But in a country like India, the sample size is large. You have around 50 to 60 per students. So what do you think is the best alternative approach to methodologically, research on translanguaging as an effective pedagogy you were referring? So my exact question is, what is the alternative approach to neuroimaging? Because here we neither have the funding to carry out such projects, because neuroimaging is very costly affair. So we can't do that kind of research. So what do you propose for diverse larger groups?
Very good question. I'm not sure I've got an answer for it. Some of my PhD students research pedagogical translanguaging in the different contexts they operate. I have a PhD student from Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, who's the director of a language school that's attached to a university, and she's responsible for the development of English for academic purposes courses. And she is currently incorporating different strategic pedagogical translanguaging into the teacher training materials. And she observes how then they use that new knowledge, new skills, the training elements into their teaching. So she observes the implementation and to what extent it works for her context. I think you are talking about some sort of large scale study. I think what we should, look into is potentially making it more cross-disciplinary and teaming up with scientists, with neuroscientists, looking at, how brain works. We should look at working with psychologists. But, you know, I know that you were kind of implying that we need hardcore evidence for the fact that multilingualism, bilingualism brings all of those benefits. But I think we should move away from this need to prove, to evidence, to say, yeah, this is working because 78% of my large scale sample from the Indian context proves that this is working. I think as individuals in our unique spaces that we are responsible for, we should look at the more meaningful, natural, relevant benefits of multilingualism. And if pedagogical translanguaging is one of the tools that leads us there, then why not? Let's experiment with it. And again, I would go back to one of my key takeaways. I think I'm running late a little bit, so I'm just going to wrap up here. Sorry if there are more questions, but I'm going to leave you with my email, and perhaps you can ask me these questions, and I'll be happy to answer these questions outside of this lecture. I think the number one takeaway here is that India, because it's such a good example of the fact that multilingualism can work with or without English's help, I think it offers such amazing opportunities for you for research, for pedagogical work, and I hope the benefits are for you quite obvious. And perhaps sometimes you don't even see them in front of you because you are so used to it. You operate in this space, so you take it for granted, okay? I think looking at translanguaging as a pedagogical approach can also help you value and utilize that student's linguistic repertoire in not only language classroom context. My lecture looked at the very specific language learning classroom context, but I truly believe it can easily be implemented into any subject class where you use different languages as medium of instruction. When you talk about literature, culture, other subjects. So whatever you do in your classroom, I think the strategies for promoting that translanguaging can include more active, more engaging code switching, designing activities that help students embrace or utilize the native languages and non-standard varieties they use, even the vernaculars. That's how people communicate. There's knowledge there. Let's embrace it. Let's recognize this. Because, I don't know, not everything can be translated from one language to another. If we suddenly move on completely to English, can you imagine the sheer amount of lost knowledge, meaning making, the concepts that cannot be literally translated? So I think building positive relationships there with multilingual students and colleagues, the families, third sector is crucial for creating that more inclusive classroom atmosphere. So yeah, if you have impacts or responsibility for curriculum and instructional materials in your context, I would like to encourage you to see how pedagogical translanguaging can make space there in a more formal, recognized way, because this will then recognize the diverse needs of multilingual learners, and that will then support not only their language development, but professional and personal development overall. So just to wrap up, I think in conclusion, I think embracing multilingualism and translanguaging in a language instruction environment, it could be clear content language integrated learning, can foster more inclusive, more effective learning environment. And if you understand the significance of multilingualism, and if you try to promote translanguaging, code switching, and create classroom space where students take risk and they're not afraid of, you know, code switch and use other languages, we then create valuable space for them to develop. So as teachers, I think we have the power to create environment where all students can thrive and reach their full potential. And if that's one of the resources that we underutilize, I would like to make a call to change that. So again, thank you for participation in this workshop. And I would like to encourage you to implement those strategies and let me know how you're doing with it. And yeah, that's all from me. If you have any questions, we've run out of time, but perhaps you can email them to me. And I also have a list of references that I've used to help me develop today's lecture. So thank you very much for all your questions and thanks for your listening.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. It was really a very intense session today, in which we also were very happy to have an interactive session. We participated in the group activity that you gave us, and it was really an eye-opener for us all, where we were learning about translanguaging, and we really found a lot of difficulties, and we learned how to overcome that. Even though it is not just one solution for all the problems there, we are still finding better ways to accommodate students with multiple multi-languages in our classrooms. So thank you so much for this wonderful session. We are very happy that we were able to hear to you these 1.5 hours. It was really very useful for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope it's useful and I hope you can use it on one occasion. And I know that you are with my colleague tomorrow, with Elspeth. She's got an amazing presentation prepared for you. So enjoy that tomorrow and, enjoy the rest of your faculty development program. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Take care. Thank you, dear participants. Please do join us tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. For the third day of the FDP. The speaker is Dr. Elspeth Jachteska, and she will be talking on linguistics and intercultural communication. So please do join us on time. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.